want to talk about local service ads and a question that I keep hearing a lot from a lot of clients that really doesn't make sense if you understand how it works. If you understand that juggling takes moving all the parts in unison, and that any one part isn't more important than the other. You can't simply say, well, look, I'm doing this part right, because this part's not moving and doing anything at all. Sometimes you can make it look like you're doing the right thing, but in reality, you're still not doing everything together. Another analogy that I think makes a lot of sense is to think of local service ads a lot like riding a bicycle, okay? If there's one aspect that's important, you can't simply say, well, hey, but I was pedaling my left foot really hard, so why isn't it working? Why can't I ride the bike? Well, if we then zoom out and take a look and notice that you're letting go of the handlebars, but you keep pedaling that left foot, well, it becomes pretty obvious that that's not going to work. It's not going to be sustainable. Local service ads operates very much like this. There's a bunch of different factors that are important. And unfortunately, it's not like pay-per-click where we can just go in and manipulate the account, push buttons, pull levers, change variables. We don't get very much of that whatsoever. So instead, it's not something that we can internally affect. It's something we have to externally affect through our behaviors. What are those behaviors? Well, the most important one that we've been told about is responsiveness. We've been told by Google right out of their mouth that it matters. Now, they haven't told us precisely what that means, but they've given us some clues. One of those clues, I think, is that the fact that they're charging you after 30 seconds may indicate that that also is something that they're measuring against in terms of responsiveness. It may be the case that answering and getting a human on the phone in under 30 seconds is important to making sure that you have a higher preference in local service ads and that your ad gets seen more frequently. Now, if you say, well, Corey, I've done all that. We're going through and we're making sure that we're answering in under 30 seconds, but we're still not getting the result. The first thing I'm going to do when I go in your account is I'm going to look at everything else. I'm going to see, well, that's great if you have your right hand on the handlebar, but let's check how you're pedaling. Let's check if you have good balance. Let's check if you are looking ahead, right? So just trying to stay within my own metaphor here, I want to point out that everything has to happen in unison or you're not going to get the same result, okay? So what are these other things besides responsiveness? Reviews, that matters. Reputation, well, what do I mean besides reviews? I mean that somebody could actually submit a complaint against you and you won't know about it. If that happens, if there's a complaint submitted, you're going to get less visibility. It's going to go down. So you have to really be on top of your customer service and make sure whoever's answering the phones is always being helpful regardless of whether or not it's a good lead. Listen, I listen to the calls of our accounts, and one of the things I can tell you is that maybe not more often than not, but a somewhat substantial amount of the time, what's going on is that people are, I should say those answering the phone are clearly more interested in the very qualified leads, and they're very disinterested in anyone who isn't a qualified lead. Or I would even suggest that sometimes maybe they are qualified leads, but if it isn't an obviously qualified lead, they just become disinterested and disqualify them quickly. I can tell you right now that that is something that is over time going to penalize you, because at some point somebody's going to feel like they weren't helped out and they're going to submit either a bad review, which you can see, or, and I've already seen this just recently, I saw a review that said, I called this company and they said that they couldn't help me or they didn't seem very interested in helping me, and they left a 1-star review. Now, is that fair? No. But unfortunately, this is the turf we play on, okay? It's the rules of the game. It's how it works for now. So what we should be doing is training our phone staff who's answering the calls from these local service ads to do their absolute level best briefly, that's fine if you're still training them and using a script, which, by the way, use a script to try to get the non-qualified leads off the phone so you're not paying for that time. That's all well and good, but it can be done in a way that has tact and attention to detail and still tries to be as helpful as you could possibly be expected to be in that circumstance, right? So perhaps you have a set of resources that you can recommend if somebody's not a qualified lead. Or perhaps you could take just the briefest amount of time to explain to them why they're not qualified or why you can't help. Just, you got to leave people with a good taste in their mouth, or you can potentially shoot yourself in the foot when it comes to LSAs if you get a bad review or a bad report if somebody complains to Google. Okay. And I just had a client today tell me that what they were doing is they were switching their reviews from one GMB to the other. They would start sending them to one location, and guess what happened? When they did that and reviews dropped off on the secondary location, guess what? Call volume dropped too. And as soon as they switched reviews back to the other one, call volume dropped over here, but it picked up over here. So we can't take our hands off the handlebars and expect that if we just keep pedaling, that the bike is going to perform precisely the same way. Okay? So we can affect our reviews and our reputation. We can affect our responsiveness. What else? What could it possibly be? Well, I have a few suggestions, a few things that we've been testing out, and I'm not going to reveal all of them. If you have curiosity and you want to reach out to me in person, I'd be happy to have a direct one-on-one chat with owners of law firms about this stuff. But the other thing that you can affect is the radius, because that's one of the big factors is how close you are to the searcher. Well, how do we do that? By opening up other locations, by taking other GMBs. And by the way, you don't necessarily need a GMB to open an LSA. It is possible you can get one. The caveat or the drawback there is that if you have an LSA that isn't married to or associated with a GMB, well, you do have a minimum threshold for reviews that you're going to have to meet in order to get that LSA up and approved. And if the day ever comes that you want to get a GMB set up, well, it's not going to have any reviews. They won't just necessarily, they're not going to transfer over, because what we've seen is that with reviews that are done through the verified reviews link with the LSA, those are only for the LSA profile. They don't belong to the GMB. So it follows that they would not go with it necessarily. So maybe that's something that'll get changed in the future. But for the time being, it doesn't look as though they correlate them. So what I want you to remember is that all of the different aspects of running an LSA campaign matter. You got to keep them running simultaneously in concert with one another. Otherwise, it's just going to fall apart and you're going to crash your bike. All right. That's all for today's episode of Clixsy Unfiltered. I'm your host, Corey Vandenberg. Thanks so much for being with us, and I look forward to speaking to you next week.